are kind of an informal think tank in the common law. We criticize each other's works and things of that nature. Randy Lee is one of those rare men that's not afraid to put his money where his mouth is. And he's a man's man, and he's a ladies' man, except that he doesn't have time for the ladies now. He's so busy touring with me and trying to keep me in one piece long enough to do another session. But Randy's done the principal research, and he was the first man, by the way, to prove the nom de guerre argument in an actual situation, in an appearance in United States District Court on an IRS order to show cause. And by this one little act, and no one had ever done this before, so we didn't have any precedents for it. We didn't have any authority for it. Randy was simply trying to test the theory of the case that we had insofar as how we mount an effective defense. And so he had been studying about the nom de guerre and a few other things, although we didn't have a lot of sites for it at that time. And he had this appearance coming up in United States District Court on this order to show cause from the IRS. And so he goes down to court, and he takes his briefcase with him, and he had a few goodies in it. And he walks in and sits down in court, and eventually the clerk calls his case, and Randy stands up and goes forward, you know, and he says, "May I speak, Your Honor?" And the judge said, "Yes, you may." And the judge is messing with paperwork on his desk and not really paying much attention to Randy. You know, he's just another victim coming in there to get fleeced, right? So, or sliced and diced. They have a lot of different ways they like to do it now for variety's sake. Anyway, the judge is messing with his paperwork, and the U.S. attorney is sitting over there with his coat pulled back and his feet stretched out like, well, this poor dumb sucker. He's going to get his pants taken off. Well, what Randy said was basically this: my name is not spelled capital R, capital A, capital N, capital D, capital Y, capital L, period, and so on. In fact, my private Christian name is capital R, lowercase a, N, D, Y. And my flag is the original flag of the California Republic, and he took one of those little miniature flags and he set it up on the podium just like this. And it stood up there. By now, the judge has quit messing with the papers on his desk, and he's got both eyes on Randy Lee. And then the last piece, Randy lays his Bible up there, and he says, "In my law is the family Bible." He said a couple of more things, and then he said, "Further I saith not." There was kind of a pregnant pause there, and the judge turned to the United States Attorney, Mr. Roth, and he says, "Well, Mr. Roth, what do you have to say about this case of mistaken identity?" And the United States Attorney says, "Well, Your Honor, he seems to think there's some kind of special significance in whether his name is capitalized or not, blah, 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 blah." And the judge said, "Very well. Next case." Now, notice that the judge did not dismiss anything because there never was a case. And as Randy knew, and as a lot of people are beginning to learn, when one goes into court, or when one files process, or when one is served process, there's only one lawful name in which that process can be filed, and that is your fully spelled first, middle, and last, upper and lower case Christian name. The name you got when you were baptized. And Randy knew that. And since there was no case, the judge said, "Sir, would you pick up your things, please? You can go." And Randy walked out of court, and the whole process only took about 4 minutes. But what it did was, it told us that the nom de guerre was not only a good argument, an argument against the nom de guerre was not only a good plea, but it seemed to carry a sense of strength that those of us in the Patriot movement are not used to. I mean, I made 16 appearances in court on traffic tickets and went to jail 4 times. Lost every single appearance that I made in court, pleading every argument that the Patriot community had coughed up over the last 10 years. I used a different one in every case. "I have the right to travel, Your Honor." Right, guilty. Now, you know, later I found out that the right to travel is a commercial term. Most people don't, in the movement, don't know that, see? But then we did the research to find out. The right to travel is a commercial term, and the only common law term that's its equivalent is liberty to use the common ways. That's the only common law expression for what we do when we slip behind the wheel of an automobile and go down the road. We are exercising the liberty of the common ways. At any rate, after I'd lost all these cases and everything else, I had pretty much gotten to the point to where I was out of ideas. And then I provoked, I mean, you could say that. I didn't believe it at the time, but his blood pressure kind of went up a little bit in this one appearance that I made against the assistant district attorney of the county where I live. And I was standing up there making an argument, which, of course, was totally out of place in a municipal or a traffic court, as I come to find out later why. But I did it anyway just to see what would happen. And the assistant district attorney jumped up and he says, if you make one more reference to the Constitution or to precedent or stare decisis, he says, I'm going to have you sanctioned. Well, I didn't even know what he meant by sanctions at the time. But I found out what I wanted to know, because he added a little phrase at the end of that in which he said, the only law in this court is the law that comes out of that judge's mouth. That sounds like a military court. And when I added that piece of information to a few things, and then Randy continuing to dig in all the law libraries in California, this man spends fortune on copying costs in these law libraries, I think, which are mostly sustained by endowments from Randy Lee's feeding coins into the copy machines. The bottom line is that what with Randy's experience and my experience and that of a couple of other people, we began to put together this theory of the case. And then we began to implement it in the form of a non-statutory abatement, the first version of which was issued a little over a year ago after we had already tried it half a dozen times or so in California. And each time it worked, we gained a little more confidence. And we kept tweaking it and changing, making little changes and things like that. At one time, I know in the first version of the abatement that we put out, why we had cites in there from the California Code of 1872. And a lot of people were running around looking for the original codification of the common law in their state and not having much luck. And then we continued to do research, primarily Randy and a couple of friends of ours in the San Fernando Valley, and we finally figured out that we don't need to cite the 1872 codes because there's another way to do it with maxims of law. See, when you cite something in Latin, it has a tendency to intimidate, first off, okay? Because he looks, you know, a judge will look at the paperwork and he'll go, and then he'll start looking for a glossary of some kind in the back to explain the maxims, see, of course, because he doesn't know what they're talking about. You know, like when you say, sua potestate esse. Judge doesn't know what that is. Sua potestata esse et uxor. That means Lord of the dominions and wife. See, much stronger term than sui juris. It also puts the man, by virtue of the maxim, on the land, all right, not on a mere parcel that's insured by title insurance and everything else. Now, having said all this, the question then becomes, but what was it that you understood about the existing system that made the abatement work? Well, that story is a little longer and a little more detailed. Part of it is in Appendix A of the American Jural Society Handbook that's in the Book of the Hundreds. And by the way, the reason why we call it the Book of the Hundreds is because in Old England and in a few of the early colonies in America, it took several hundreds in order to form a county. They were small communities of hundreds, of up to 100 people.